Hello everyone and welcome back to the JP on Comms YouTube channel. If you're new around here, leave a subscription down below. Of course, leave a like on the video as well if you're a channel regular and you do enjoy the content we put out here on this channel. But we are, of course, today going to be taking a look at my Premier League predictions for the 23-24 campaign. Before we get into it, I'm going to put a link on the screen as well for the Fantasy Premier League app league that I'm going to be setting up for the channel. Of course, as we know, last year it is all done just for celebratory nature at the end of it. Unfortunately, I'm far too broke to offer any prizes, but it's done for the pride at the end of the day, to say you've got the best ball knowledge within the community. So let's crack on with the video. We're going to be taking a look at our 1 to 20 full league predictions for the season. I'm going to give you my top scorer and player of the season as well. So let's crack on with the video. And in bottom place, I'm going to have Luton Town. Unfortunately for me, Luton just have not strengthened. They are by far the smallest club in the Premier League for next season. I mean, the biggest signing so far is probably Ross Barkley. I think he signed today at the time of recording. This is Thursday the 10th of August, kind of a bit late with this prediction video, but I wanted to see just how much I could squeeze in. Besides that, they signed Marvelous Nakamba from Villa for a couple of million, and for me, they just don't have the squad already to have that little amount of strengthening added to it. 19th place, I've got Sheffield United. Now, of course, Sheffield, last time they were in the Premier League, really impressed for part of their time in the league under Chris Wilder. Of course, now looking a little bit weaker than that last time around. Unfortunately, they lost Sander Berge to Burnley, of course, potentially a relegation rival in this upcoming season. They've also lost Ndiaye to Marseille for quite a bit of money as well, and they haven't really brought in anybody of significant quality, not to my knowledge anyway, looking at their signings earlier on today. So yeah, I think they're just going to be too weak, unfortunately. Of course, they are going to have that working ethos which could carry them through, but for me, 19th place for Sheffield. My last relegation place is going to go to Everton. Now, Everton, of course, have diminished in recent years in terms of their on the field and off the field performance. Of course, large financial issues going on around the club at the moment. Sean Dyche brought in last season to try and save them. He did just about, but they've lost Yerry Mina and Connor Cody. They haven't really brought in too many replacements. I mean, they signed Dan Juma on loan, who of course didn't really do anything at Tottenham last season. Very good for Villarreal in his time there, and for Bournemouth as well back in the day, but nothing last season. And they've signed Ashley Young on a free. I mean, it's not looking good for Everton, I cannot lie. They've lost as well. Moise Keane wasn't really playing for them, of course, was out on loan, but they've lost him permanently now. Could have been a good player for them, but they're going to have to rely on DCL for goals this season, and with his fitness concerns, you never know. Number 17, I've gone for Nottingham Forest. They've brought in Chris Wood and Anthony Elanga. Matt Turner as well has just signed from Arsenal. So they have brought in a couple of decent players there, but I just don't think that there's too much quality. It's going to save them from relegation, in my opinion. I thought they were good enough last season. I really rate the manager as well. I think he's done a good job with the cards he's been dealt. Obviously signed a huge amount of players. I think it was almost 20 or around 20 last season. A lot less this time round. Has also got rid of quite a few players from last season's squad. But for me, they're going to be just enough to survive, mainly down to the manager. Number 16, I'm going to have Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves are a funny one. They are a team who in recent years, of course, have struggled quite significantly. At points last season looked destined for relegation, did end up chopping and changing things, had Lopetegui come in, has actually just lost his job to the old Bournemouth manager, O'Neill. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do with Wolves. Obviously did really well with Bournemouth last season, one of the manager of the season for sure. But he's coming into a squad that has lost Ruben Neves, lost Nathan Collins, lost Raul Jimenez and Yao Martino as well. And they are four very big players for Wolves, really. And they, again, haven't really signed anybody. Cunha's coming, of course, towards the end of last season, I believe it was. But whether that can all click for him, I don't know. I really don't know. Obviously, he knew that Bournemouth team really well. Had a good ethos there, good team spirit. But he's going into this Wolves side, which is going to be chopping and changing quite a bit. They're going to need a few more signings, in my opinion, if they want to push on. But I back that manager, and I think the squad they've got with the foundation of players there, they have still got a few decent players in. Could just keep them up. So I'm going to go with 16 for Wolves. In 15th place, I'm going to have O'Neill's team from last season. I'm going to have Bournemouth. Today, they've just signed 2 signings, which I think are fantastic. Max Aarons from Norwich and Alex Scott from Bristol City, 2 of the Championship's biggest prospects. In my opinion, I think both of these players are fantastic. Max Aarons, of course, a few years ago when Norwich were in the Premier League, linked to a plethora of top Premier League sides, has, of course, dropped off a little bit in that time, but as have Norwich as a club. Back in the Premier League now, and I think he's got a point to prove. I think he's going to be really good next season. Alex Scott, 20 to 25 million pounds for this deal for arguably the brightest prospect in that division, a very young player as well. And they've got that new manager in as well. I don't know a great deal about this manager, I cannot lie to you. But they did sack O'Neill after a really good season, so they must know what they're doing. They must have that plan in place. Obviously, a strategy has been implemented, bringing in young, exciting players like this. So for me, I'm going to have Bournemouth in 15th. Bit of a transitional season, but again, I think the squad there from last season, combined with a couple of good young additions, is going to keep them up. 14th place, I've gone for Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace, a funny old team, aren't they? Last season, of course, really struggling under Vieira. Did not go too well for him, unfortunately, and they cut his time short, really, in my opinion. But they did bring back Roy Hodgson, and Roy Ball was a great success towards the end of the season. Palace had a real upturn in form, managed to stay safe quite significantly, and I don't know whether that's going to carry on into this season. Obviously, I think Roy Hodgson's football is a little bit dated. I do think that he has got the dressing room, which of course is a positive, but he has lost Wilfried Zaha. Gone to, I believe, Galatasaray, definitely a Turkish team, I think it's Galatasaray. Wilfried Zaha has been the reason Crystal Palace have stayed in the Premier League for a number of years now. Obviously had his injury concerns last season, still a top player for them, and he's gone. They have bought in Lerma from Bournemouth, good player, really good player in the midfield there, and Franca as well, a young Brazilian talent. Don't know too much about him, but my friend is a Crystal Palace fan, seems to have done a little bit of digging and thinks he's quite a bright prospect, so we'll go with that. I'm going to have Palace in 14th place. 13th, I'm going to have Fulham. Fulham, unfortunately for them, after such a great season last year, are having a bit of a car crash this summer. Marco Silva could be on his way out. Of course, the manager, so important to their success last season, may be off to Saudi Arabia. Mitrovic, of course, claiming that he's not going to be playing for the club again unless, and he is going to go to Saudi Arabia, or he'll just rot away in the reserves, is the stance he's taken. They've, of course, also lost Manor Solomon to Tottenham, and they may as well be losing Palhinha, of course, really good, one of the best midfielders in the league last season for interceptions and tackles and passing and things like that. Incredible player, really heavily looked at by top sides in the division as well. Liverpool, City, United have all looked at him this summer, and they could lose him too. And I think that could put them in a bit of a sticky situation, but you never know. I think they're going to drop off a little bit from last season. I think they'll still stay up. I think 13th is a pretty safe bet. They have, however, bought in Jimenez, of course, from Wolves. Hasn't been the same since that horrendous head injury, but you never know. He may refine that form back at Fulham. And they've also bought in Calvin Bassey from Ajax, who was, of course, really good for Rangers. Has had a decent season for Ajax. But I don't know if he's at top quality to keep Fulham in that top half of the table. I think he is a sort of middle of the pack player, and I think he kind of suits that 13th place. So I've put Fulham in. 12th position, I'm going to have promotion title winners of the Championship, Burnley. I think Burnley walked the Championship last season. I don't even think that. I know that. They sat off right in the end of the season as well and still won by quite a few points. And they've made some good signings, in my opinion. They've signed James Trafford, of course, heroics from the under-21s England team, the penalty saves and things like that. Don't believe he conceded all tournament as well, which of course is outstanding. Top goalkeeper. He will be England #1 more than likely in a matter of years. Really quality player, and for only about £20 million as well, 15-20 million. Good stuff there. And they've signed Sander Berg as well, who, again, teams like Liverpool and Manchester United have looked at in recent years, very heavily considered by Liverpool, and they've picked him up for about £12 million, I think it was, from a relegation candidate in Sheffield. So they're putting them down, boosting themselves up. One of Sheffield's best players there, and for me, I think they've just very slightly strengthened a very good squad from last year. What Company's doing is top class. Really like what he's doing over there, the way he plays football, the analysis he puts on football. Bit of a footballing addict from what I can tell, and sometimes you need that, and there's always that one team who gets promoted who does far better than anybody thinks. So for me, that's going to be Burnley. Next, I'm going to have West Ham in 11th. I think, they've lost Declan Rice, maybe losing Lucas Paqueta as well to Manchester City for, that's 70 to 80 million pounds, I think is the talk. And they have started reinvesting that finally, just a couple of days before the season starts. Edison Alvarez has come in from Ajax, defensive midfielder. Good replacement in my opinion. Again, another player has been looked at by good teams around Europe, and James Ward-Prowse as well. Signed both of them for a combined, I think, 50 to 60 million pounds. Good business. I think that's good business. James Ward-Prowse is going to offer them something that they've not really had too much of in recent years. That kind of sturdy yet creative midfielder who can also put the ball in the back of the net. Obviously, set pieces, top class. I think, after last season's European success, West Ham are going to improve a little bit. Obviously, they're now going to be in the Europa League. That could prove to be quite fatal for David Moyes and West Ham, but I think if they could just replace a couple of players in the squad, Mikel Antonio, obviously Scamacca's gone as well now, but if they can get a decent goal scoring centre forward, not world class or anything like that, but a decent 15 goal a season, 10 to 15 goal a season striker, I think they'll be alright. I think they'll be a solid mid-table side. Brentford, no Ivan Toney, have bought in Nathan Collins from Wolves, so good signing there, but haven't really strengthened all that much. Have secured the sign, I think, Kevin Schade, very quick, potentially quite talented young player in that forward line for them. Had a decent season last season, but needs more in terms of output for me. I think Brentford are going to finish 10th. I think they're going to drop off from last season. It seems to me like a lot of the teams in that top half of the table are strengthened. Brentford are a little bit behind the pack right now. You never know, that may change, of course. Still plenty of time left, almost a month left of the transfer window, so we'll see how that one goes for them. 9th place, I'm going to have Tottenham Hotspur. It's Tottenham, isn't it? I mean, they have strengthened. They brought in some really good players as well. Actually, Manuel Solomon from Fulham, big fan of him. They've also brought in Vicario in goal, losing Lloris. Mistake prone is Lloris, to be fair. I understand why they got rid of him. I've never been a big fan of him, but don't know anything about Vicario. Bought in Devent as well for a lot of money from Wolfsburg. And James Maddison, quality player, really good in the last couple of years for Leicester. Obviously couldn't keep them up last year, but they have strengthened. They've also got Postecoglou in as well, very attacking, forward-minded manager. That could prove really beneficial to Harry Kane's game. Obviously played under quite defensive and regressive managers in recent years and still getting 25 odd goals a season. So, I mean, if he stays, Harry Kane, Spurs could definitely do better than 9th, but I don't know if he will. And even if he does, there's no guarantees, with this new management, obviously a transitional period for the club. I think 9th is probably about right. Maybe pushing that kind of 8th or 7th spot, but not too much more than that for me for Spurs. 8th place, I'm going to have Brighton. For me, Brighton have weakened a little bit. They've lost, obviously, Alexis McAllister. They've lost Sanchez as well, their goalkeeper. And they're going to lose Caicedo, let's be fair. Chelsea, Liverpool, both looking like they're very highly in for him. But again, Brighton have done what Brighton do. They've signed a couple of players who in the next couple of years could be really, really top players. They've signed, of course, João Pedro from Watford. They've signed Bart Verbruggen from the Belgian Pro League, another player who's been looked at by the likes of Manchester United. Igor as well from Fiorentina, another decent young central defender. It's just, this is what Brighton do. I mean, we saw it last season where they shipped out some really, really key players in Yves Bissouma and things like that. But they did really, really well in replacing them. You know, Bissouma out, Caicedo in. He's now going for £70 million. I think Brighton are going to be okay. I think they're going to be a little bit weaker than last season. That's why I've got them finishing in 8th. But that's still a really good season for Brighton. You know, let's not underrate that at all. 8th would be a fantastic finish for them, in my opinion. 7th place, I'm going to have Chelsea. Obviously, Mauricio Pochettino is in. Another team undergoing transition. And they've made a lot of signings. Christopher Nkunku, unfortunately injured by the looks of things. They've also signed Disasi from Monaco. They've signed Nicholas Jackson, of course, from Villarreal, looking really bright and prosperous in pre-season. Sanchez from Brighton. And they've got Colwill and Ian Maatson back as well from their respective loans to Burnley and Brighton. 2 young players, 2 potentially top class players as well. Levi Colwill is already up there for me. Ian Maatson, another very exciting young prospect. Have lost a few players as well. Obviously Havertz, Mickey Mount, as I call him, if you're familiar with the channel. Koulibaly, Mendy, Kovacic as well. Big loss for me is Mateo Kovacic, but I'm not too fussed with the rest of the players there. Maybe Havertz, maybe Mickey Mount, but they've not been great the last season or two. So yeah, I think, you know, another transitional period for Chelsea. Obviously, Poch has got a lot of work to do, but he's certainly got the money to do it. So we'll see how that one goes for them. 7th place. Number 6, I've got Aston Villa. Villa under Emery really surprised me last season. I really like Unai Emery. I think he's a great manager, but I didn't think he was going to turn things around for them after the mess that Steven Gerrard left them in. Some top signings. Yuri Tillemans on a free. Pau Torres, fantastic defender, again linked to the likes of Man United and other teams around Europe. And Diaby from Bayer Leverkusen, another really good player for a lot of money. 80 plus million spent by Villa. They haven't lost any key players, managed to retain the likes of Ollie Watkins, John McGinn, Tyrone Mings, all really good players. Obviously did lose Ashley Young, but you know, quite an old player, not someone they're really relying on. I think Villa are going to do great next season. I think Unai Emery is a master tactician. I think he knows exactly how to get a team into European positions. I think he's going to do it with Aston Villa next season. So hopefully we'll see some good things from them. 5th place, this was probably the toughest one between 4th and 5th. I've gone with Newcastle. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me here, and you're probably right. Great signings. Tino Livramento from Southampton, fantastic player. Harvey Barnes from Leicester, another good young player. And Sandro Tonali, one of Europe's top midfield prospects. They've lost St Maximin as well, but I don't think they'll be too bothered about that, replacing him with Harvey Barnes. I just think that Newcastle overperformed last season for sure, and they're going to have European competition next season. That is probably going to impact them. They've obviously got a team which is not familiar with that quantity of games as regularly as they're going to be playing next season. You know, that kind of Sunday, Tuesday games, or Sunday, Wednesday, all that sort of thing. You know, the midweek games combined with the weekend games is really going to take it out of them, and I think that could impact them a little bit. And that's why I put Manchester United in 4th. Obviously have offloaded a hell of a lot of deadwood. Harry Maguire looks like he's going to West Ham. David De Gea is gone. They've also got rid of Alanga, Phil Jones, Alex Tellez, Eric Bailly. A lot of deadwood gone there, which is good for them. Going to free up that wage budget. Going to help that squad in terms of its cohesiveness. You know, you're reducing the number of players there. Going to have a much tighter unit. They've brought in Rasmus Højlund. Young prospect, I really don't know about him, to be honest. 9 goals in all competitions last season. It's not great, but his statistics look promising. So you never know. It's a hell of a lot of money though. Mickey Mount could be a good player, but I don't know where he's really going to fit in. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes plays that more attacking midfield role for for Manchester United, but maybe pushing one of Mickey Mount or Bruno Fernandes out wide. Interesting to see how that one goes down. And then Andre Onana as well. I think he's probably a decent addition. Obviously hasn't looked great in pre-season with a couple of mistakes and things like that, but that's transition. When you're going from a very good shot stopper, but yet not the greatest ball player and risk taker in David De Gea, and completely changing that around, it's going to take some teething. It's going to take some bedding in, to really nail down that system. But I think it'll work out for them, and I think Ten Hag is getting that consistency with the team now. I think as well they're probably going to sign another player, maybe in Amrabat from Fiorentina, a good midfielder, and they definitely need that backup for Casemiro. I think if they could get that done, then they're looking pretty solid for next season, and I think they'll probably build on tackling competition like Newcastle. So 4th place for Manchester United for me. 3rd place, I'm going to put Liverpool. Liverpool, obviously, with a season last year which was very, very poor by their standards. Signed 2 great players in Alexis McAllister and Dominic Szoboszlai. 2 players which they desperately needed, creative midfielders. They've obviously got a lot of forward players with a lot of quality, and Salah and Jota and Darwin Núñez and Gakpo, you name it. They've got so many players up front who are really, really impressive, but it's about feeding them. And really the midfielder they had last season didn't do that. Jordan Henderson and Fabinho, of course, both departing. Thiago potentially looking like he could be on his way out as well. They've also lost Bobby Firmino and James Milner. Now, James Milner and Henderson, vice-captain, captain of the squad. Van Dijk and Trent, the new captain and vice-captain of the squad. It's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic changes, losing key members of leadership in the last 5 or 6 years for Liverpool. And Bobby Firmino, I mean, despite being out of the squad at times last year, contributed so much. Was one of the better performers when he did play last year for Liverpool. And for me, that's a really big loss. So we'll see how they do cope with that. They could also be looking at signing Romeo Lavia and Moises Caicedo as well. So another couple of additions there which would improve their chances of getting 3rd or higher in the league. My second position team is going to be Arsenal. Going to go with the same as last season. I think Arsenal really did well last season with the squad that they had. A very, very young transitional team, and they have expertly improved it, in my opinion. Declan Rice is probably, for me, the signing of the summer. Obviously a hell of a lot of money, but if you look at the player they're getting, Declan Rice would get into any team in the world, I believe. You'd argue Manchester City and Real Madrid maybe, but trust me, they'd find space if they had Declan Rice to fit him into the team. Jurrien Timber, of course, great player as well. Very, very dynamic, can play on the left, can play on the right, can play at the central defensive position as well. And Kai Havertz. Now, for me, Kai Havertz is a huge risk, but if it works out, they've got one of Europe's best talents. When he was at Bayer Leverkusen, everybody was all over Kai Havertz. He tore apart the Bundesliga, was fantastic over there, and it really didn't work out for him at Chelsea. And I'm not being funny, not a lot of players do that well at Chelsea in recent years. This could be the new start that he needs. So yeah, I think Arsenal and City are going to be really close next season, but City coming off the back of a treble, going for a historic 4th Premier League title in a row, I think they're going to do some madness again. 1st place, obviously, champions for Manchester City. They've lost Mahrez and Gundogan, huge players of course, but in their place they've signed Mateo Kovacic from Chelsea. I think in terms of replacing Gundogan, that's probably as good as they're going to get in terms of weakening a rival as well. And Josko Gvardiol, I mean, they didn't really need defensive reinforcement. John Stones, Laporte, Diaz, Akanji, all fantastic players. but they've just cemented their back line for the next 7 years in Guardiola. A hell of a lot of money. I think the squad they've already got, the ethos they've already got, players like Jack Grealish now coming into full force. I just think they're unstoppable. I really do. I don't think they're going to do a quadruple or anything like that next season, but I could certainly see them win the Premier League, and definitely at least an FA or Carabao Cup. And you never know, they may go back-to-back Champions Leagues. I hate to see it, but at the moment I can't see who stops them. I really can't. I mean, they're tying down players like Kyle Walker as well to new contracts, despite how desperate Bayern Munich were to get him. I just can't see them losing out again. For me, Manchester City are going to win the Premier League. In terms of my top scorer and player of the year, I think that top scorer next season could be really interesting. I think that, if Spurs do overperform from where I've put them in this upcoming Premier League campaign, Harry Kane is going to be up there for sure. Like I said earlier on the video, playing under defensive managers in recent years, still wasn't that far behind Haaland last year. But for me, I am going to go for Erling Haaland. Easy pick, to be fair, but I think, at times people will say, after the first year, you kind of get found out. People know how you play. People pick up your runs a little bit better. They know how to work towards defending you. Did you watch Haaland play last season? I mean, some of the things he did to defend us in the Premier League was, it was disturbing to watch, to be fair, how he just bullied some players out of the way like they didn't even exist. And I think he's going to do the same again this season. I don't think he'll score as many as last season, but I think he's still going to score the most. And for my player of the year, I think player of the year has got to come from the team that's got the most success. And I think, again, Manchester City, they're going to be the best team in the Premier League. I think we could see potentially a midfield player getting it for Manchester City. It wouldn't surprise me to see the likes of Kevin De Bruyne or Bernardo Silva picking it up. I'm going to go for Kevin De Bruyne. Again, potentially a very easy pick. I would like to say Declan Rice, because I think he could be that player which just takes Arsenal up to that next level. And I think if Arsenal win the Premier League, I think Declan Rice will win Player of the Year. But for me, I've got to go with my predictions. I've got to back that as well. And of course, when it comes down to trying to pinpoint your Player of the Year, it typically goes to someone who's played for the team that's won the league. So yes, Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland respectively there. And that is going to wrap up this season's Premier League predictions. So if you did enjoy the video, it's been a little bit of a long-winded one, but of course we've gone and covered the entire Premier League and a little bit more here in this video. So if you did enjoy it, do subscribe to the channel, do like the video down below, leave your thoughts in the comments as well. And of course, I'll put the link on the screen again. Do join the FPL League ahead of the season start later on this evening from when you'll be seeing this video. So thank you also very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.